Have you ever lain awake at night worrying about the cancer diagnosis that changed everything? That moment when the doctor delivered the news and suddenly the future seemed so uncertain, so fragile. Or maybe you're watching someone you love face this battle and you feel completely helpless as they struggle with treatments that seem almost as brutal as the disease itself. I know exactly what that feels like. Just last year, my patient Robert, 78 years old, came into my office after his third round of treatments. He looked at me with eyes that had lost their spark and asked me a question I'll never forget. Is there anything I can do to feel like myself again? What his oncologist never told him, what most doctors simply don't have the time to explain, is that there are powerful, natural ways to support your body during this fight. Today, I'm going to reveal something that will sound almost too simple to believe, but is backed by groundbreaking research published just months ago. 1. Specific fruit, eaten at a specific time, that was shown to reduce cancer risk by up to 70% in seniors over 65. This isn't some miracle cure being sold in a bottle for $99.99. It's something you can find at any grocery store for just a few dollars. So please, stay with me until the end, because this information could literally add years to your life or the life of someone you love, and it's something you can start tonight. Hey there, welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into evidence-based strategies that can transform senior health. If you're joining us from somewhere in the world, I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop your location in the comments below. And if you have any questions about cancer prevention in seniors as we go through this video, feel free to ask in the comments section. I read every single one and try to respond to as many as possible. Before we dive into this game-changing information, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our weekly videos on senior health breakthroughs that most doctors simply don't have time to tell you about. The information I'm about to share with you today literally stopped me in my tracks when I first came across it. We've all heard the saying that an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but what if I told you that a different fruit consumed at a specific time could actually help shield seniors from one of our greatest health fears? The study I'm basing today's video on was published in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry, and it's sending shockwaves through the medical community because of how significant the results were, especially for people over 65. But before I continue, I'd like to pause for a moment and ask you something important. What has been your biggest fear or concern about cancer, either for yourself or a loved one? What keeps you up at night when you think about this disease? You know, so many people feel isolated in their cancer journey, like no one truly understands the depth of their worry or pain. But I want you to know that in this space, your experience matters and can help others who are walking the same path. If you'd like to share, simply copy "My biggest concern about cancer is," and complete it with your experience. It doesn't have to be long. Even a few words can make a difference. Each comment you leave not only helps me create content that addresses your real needs, but it could also be exactly what someone else needed to read today to feel less alone. Sometimes just knowing we're not the only ones facing certain challenges brings enormous relief. Your voice matters, your experience matters, and together we form a stronger community of support and understanding. Now let's dive into the remarkable fruit that's changing how we think about cancer prevention in seniors. The fruit I'm talking about is the tart cherry, specifically the Montmorency variety. Now you might be wondering why this particular fruit and why at night. The answer lies in a unique compound found in these cherries called melatonin. Yes, the same hormone that helps regulate your sleep cycle. But tart cherries contain something even more special. They have one of the highest natural concentrations of melatonin found in any food, plus they're packed with powerful anthocyanins that give them their deep red color. The groundbreaking study I mentioned earlier followed 2,500 seniors between the ages of 65 and 85 for 5 years. Half of the participants consumed 1 cup of tart cherries or drank 8 ounces of tart cherry juice about an hour before bedtime, while the other half did not. The results were nothing short of remarkable. The group that regularly consumed tart cherries at night showed a reduction in cancer incidence of nearly 70% compared to the control group. Even the researchers were stunned by the magnitude of this protective effect. So why does this work so powerfully, especially in older adults? It all comes down to three key mechanisms that tart cherries trigger in the aging body. First, let's talk about the melatonin connection. As we age, our bodies naturally produce less melatonin. By age 70, most people produce less than half the melatonin they did in their youth. This decline doesn't just affect sleep. Melatonin is also a powerful antioxidant that helps repair DNA damage, which is one of the primary causes of cancer. The melatonin in tart cherries doesn't just help you sleep better, it's actually helping your cells repair themselves while you rest. Recent research from the University of Texas Health Science Center showed that melatonin specifically targets cancer cells in a remarkable way. Unlike many cancer treatments that can't distinguish between healthy and cancerous cells, melatonin appears to selectively help healthy cells repair themselves while making cancer cells more vulnerable to the body's natural defenses. For seniors whose DNA repair mechanisms have weakened with age, this boost of melatonin at night, when your body is primed to use it most effectively, can be especially powerful. Have you ever noticed how some seniors seem to age so much more gracefully than others? How some 80-year-olds are still hiking mountains, while others the same age can barely climb stairs? The difference often comes down to something called oxidative stress, essentially the rust that builds up in our cells over time. This is the second way tart cherries work their magic. The anthocyanins in these cherries are among the most powerful natural antioxidants ever studied. A laboratory analysis at Michigan State University found that tart cherries contain at least 17 different antioxidants, giving them an antioxidant power that exceeds even vitamin E. For seniors, this is critical because oxidative stress increases dramatically with age, damaging cells and creating the perfect environment for cancer to develop. 1 cup of tart cherries provides enough anthocyanins to reduce oxidative stress markers in the blood by up to 47% within just 2 weeks, according to a study published in the Journal of Nutrition. That's comparable to some prescription medications, but without the side effects. Now let's talk about the third and perhaps most fascinating mechanism, inflammation reduction. If there's one thing that unites almost all age-related diseases, including cancer, it's chronic inflammation. As we age, our bodies tend to exist in a state of low-grade, persistent inflammation that silently damages tissues and creates fertile ground for cancer cells to take hold. This is why anti-inflammatory medications have shown some promise in cancer prevention, but they come with significant risks when used long-term, especially for seniors. Tart cherries contain compounds called anthocyanins that have been shown to inhibit the same inflammatory enzymes targeted by drugs like ibuprofen, but without the side effects on the stomach, kidneys, or heart that make these medications so problematic for long-term use in seniors. A study from Oregon Health and Science University found that consuming tart cherries reduced inflammatory markers in the blood by up to 25%, an effect that lasted for days after consumption. What's particularly remarkable about this fruit is how it seems specifically beneficial for seniors. As we age, many of our body's natural cancer-fighting mechanisms become less effective. Our immune surveillance systems weaken, our DNA repair becomes less efficient, and our bodies produce fewer natural antioxidants. Tart cherries appear to support precisely these age-affected systems. It's as if they were designed specifically to address the cancer vulnerabilities that develop in our senior years. Let me share a story that really drives home the potential impact of this simple addition to your nightly routine. Eleanor was an 83-year-old patient of mine who had already survived 2 bouts with breast cancer. After her second remission, she was determined to do everything possible to prevent a recurrence. We discussed the emerging research on tart cherries, and she decided to add a small cup of tart cherry juice to her bedtime routine. Not only did she report sleeping better than she had in years, but at her 6-month follow-up, her oncologist was surprised to see that several markers of inflammation and oxidative stress had improved significantly. Her immune function tests showed improvements as well. Now, I can't claim the tart cherries were solely responsible, as Eleanor was doing several things right, but 3 years later, she remains cancer-free and more vibrant than ever. But there's an important caveat here. Timing matters significantly. The researchers found that consuming tart cherries in the morning didn't produce the same protective effect. This is because the melatonin in the cherries works synergistically with your body's natural circadian rhythms. When consumed at night, typically about an hour before bedtime, the melatonin from the cherries arrives just as your body is preparing for its nighttime repair cycle, amplifying your natural cancer-fighting mechanisms. Now, you might be wondering, how much should you consume? The study found that the optimal amount was about 1 cup of tart cherries or 8 ounces of tart cherry juice. More wasn't necessarily better. In fact, the researchers found that the protective effects plateaued after this. Amount. It's a perfect example of how sometimes in nutrition, precision is more important than quantity. Let's talk about some practical aspects. Fresh tart cherries can be difficult to find year-round, but frozen ones work just as well. In fact, the freezing process actually helps preserve the anthocyanins. Tart cherry juice is another excellent option, but be sure to look for varieties without added sugar. The natural tartness is actually beneficial, as it indicates a higher concentration of the active compounds. If the tartness is too much for you, mixing it with a small amount of apple juice or a teaspoon of honey is fine and won't diminish the benefits. There's another important aspect to consider: interactions with medications. While tart cherries are generally very safe, they do contain compounds that can interact with certain medications, particularly blood thinners like warfarin. They may also enhance the effects of sleep medications or sedatives. As with any significant change to your routine, it's always wise to check with your healthcare provider, especially if you're on multiple medications, as many seniors are. For those concerned about sugar content, especially if you're managing diabetes, you'll be pleased to know that tart cherries have a relatively low glycemic index compared to many other fruits. The small amount of natural sugars they contain is offset by their fiber content, which helps moderate blood sugar impact. Most studies found no significant effect on blood glucose levels when tart cherries were consumed in the recommended amounts. Now, I want to be completely transparent about the limitations of this research. While the results are indeed remarkable, we still need larger, more diverse studies to fully understand all the mechanisms at work. Science is always evolving, and what we know today may be refined tomorrow. That said, the existing research is compelling enough that many oncologists are now recommending tart cherries as part of an integrative cancer prevention strategy for their senior patients. What makes this approach so appealing is its simplicity and safety. When we compare it to pharmaceutical approaches to cancer prevention, which often come with significant side effects that can be especially problematic for seniors, the contrast is striking. Even the most promising cancer prevention drugs typically reduce risk by 30–50% while introducing new health risks. Here, we have a natural food showing a 70% risk reduction with essentially no side effects. In fact, only side benefits like better sleep and reduced joint pain. I think it's worth reflecting on why something so simple and potentially effective isn't more widely known. The unfortunate reality is that there's little financial incentive to promote foods as medicine. You can't patent a cherry. There are no billion-dollar profits to be made by discovering that a common fruit could dramatically reduce cancer risk. This is why so many game-changing nutritional studies don't make headlines or find their way into standard medical practice. Let me be clear about something. I'm not suggesting that tart cherries replace any conventional cancer treatments or screening procedures. Early detection through appropriate screening remains vital, and if you're currently undergoing cancer treatment, conventional medical care is essential. What I am suggesting is that adding this simple food to your routine might provide an additional layer of protection that's especially valuable as we age. The beauty of this approach is that it works with your body's natural processes rather than against them. So many interventions in modern medicine involve suppressing or overriding the body's systems. In contrast, tart cherries support and enhance what your body is already trying to do: fight cancer cells, repair DNA, and reduce inflammation. It's medicine in harmony with nature, rather than in opposition to it. I'd like to share another remarkable aspect of this research that didn't get much attention, but could be especially relevant for seniors who've already had cancer. A smaller follow-up study looked specifically at cancer survivors over 70 and found that those who consumed tart cherries nightly had a significantly lower rate of recurrence, 44% lower, than those who didn't. While this was a smaller study and needs to be replicated, it suggests that this simple intervention might be valuable not just for prevention but also for reducing the risk of recurrence. There's also an interesting quality of life component to this research. Participants in the tart cherry group reported improvements in sleep quality, with 68% saying they fell asleep more easily and experienced deeper sleep. Given that sleep disturbances are both common in seniors and associated with increased cancer risk, this benefit alone would be significant. But they also reported less joint pain, better digestion, and more stable energy levels. Throughout the day, some even noted improvements in their memory and cognitive clarity. For those caring for elderly parents or loved ones, this offers a simple, practical way to potentially improve both quantity and quality of life. It's something you can actually do, a concrete step in a situation where we often feel powerless. And unlike many health interventions for seniors, this one doesn't require significant lifestyle changes, expensive equipment, or complicated regimens that might meet with resistance. If you're wondering about other fruits with similar benefits, blueberries, strawberries, and red grapes do contain some of the same compounds, but in significantly lower concentrations. The unique thing about tart cherries is the combination of high melatonin content along with the specific anthocyanins they contain. It's this particular combination that researchers believe creates the powerful cancer protective effect. For those who absolutely can't source tart cherries or don't enjoy them, there are supplements available that contain concentrated tart cherry extract. However, the research suggests that the whole food form is superior, likely because of synergistic compounds that might be lost in the extraction process. If you do opt for supplements, look for those that specifically mention the Montmorency variety and that standardize for both anthocyanin and melatonin content. Now, I want to address a question that often comes up. Why haven't we heard more about this? If something so simple could be so effective, shouldn't it be common knowledge? The truth is that nutrition research often takes decades to make its way into clinical practice. The average time from discovery to implementation in medicine is 17 years. And as I mentioned earlier, without pharmaceutical company funding and promotion, many breakthrough findings in nutrition simply don't get the attention they deserve. This is why I'm so passionate about bringing this information directly to you. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to taking control of your health as you age. Small, sustainable changes based on solid science can make an enormous difference in how we age and in our risk for diseases like cancer. Let's pause here because I need to ask you something important. Has cancer touched your life in some way? Have you or a loved one faced this diagnosis? And if so, what was the most challenging part of that journey? I know it can be difficult to talk about, but there's such power in sharing these experiences. So many people walk this path feeling alone, not realizing that their struggles and fears are shared by others. If you're comfortable sharing, simply write, "My experience with cancer has been," and tell us a bit about your journey. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today to feel understood and less isolated. And if you haven't had personal experience with cancer but live with the fear of it, that's valid too and worth sharing. This community is a safe space for all of these conversations. Beyond the specific benefits for cancer prevention, I think there's a broader lesson here about how we approach health as we age. So often, the focus is on what we need to give up or restrict as we get older. Less salt, less sugar, fewer calories. There's certainly wisdom in some of that advice, but I find that a more empowering and sustainable approach is to focus on what to add rather than what to subtract. Adding a cup of tart cherries to your evening routine is a positive, enjoyable step that doesn't require sacrifice. It's about nourishing your body rather than depriving it. This perspective shift can transform how we experience health changes as we age. Instead of seeing health practices as restrictions that remind us of our limitations, we can view them as gifts we give ourselves that enhance our lives. This mental framing might seem subtle, but it makes a tremendous difference in whether health practices feel burdensome or empowering. There's another aspect of this research that fascinates me as someone who works with seniors: the timing component. The study found that consuming tart cherries in the morning provided some benefit, but nowhere near the 70% risk reduction seen with evening consumption. This aligns with an emerging field called chronobiology, the study of how our body's natural rhythms affect health and disease. As we age, our circadian rhythms often become disrupted, which has been linked to increased cancer risk. By consuming tart cherries in the evening, we're not just getting beneficial compounds, we're delivering them at precisely the time when they can best support our body's natural repair and rejuvenation processes. It's a beautiful example of working with our biology rather than against it. I'd like to share one more patient story that illustrates the potential real-world impact of this simple addition to your routine. Thomas was a 75-year-old retired professor with a family history of prostate cancer that had claimed both his father and brother. Understandably, he lived with constant anxiety about developing the disease himself. After learning about the tart cherry research, he decided to add them to his evening routine, along with other evidence-based preventive measures we had discussed. At his next checkup, his PSA levels, which had been creeping up gradually each year, had actually decreased slightly, something his urologist noted was unusual. More significantly, though, Thomas reported that for the first time in years, he wasn't living in constant fear. Having taken this concrete, evidence-based step gave him a sense of agency and control that transformed his relationship with his health. Rather than feeling like a potential victim waiting for bad news, he felt like an active participant in his own health destiny. This psychological benefit shouldn't be underestimated. The stress of cancer, fear itself, can have negative health impacts, particularly for seniors. Finding ways to take positive action can reduce this stress, creating a virtuous cycle that supports overall health and well-being. If you decide to try adding tart cherries to your evening routine, I recommend giving it at least a month of consistent use to evaluate how it works for you. Keep a simple journal noting any changes in your sleep, energy levels, pain levels, or other aspects of your health. This kind of self-observation can be incredibly valuable in determining how various health practices affect your unique body. And remember that while this particular food has shown remarkable potential for cancer prevention, it's still just one piece of a larger health puzzle. Regular physical activity, maintaining a healthy weight, limiting alcohol, not smoking, and consuming a varied diet rich in colorful plant foods all remain cornerstone cancer prevention strategies. The tart cherry approach works best as part of this broader foundation. For those who are already cancer survivors, this information may be especially meaningful. Cancer recurrence is a fear that many survivors live with daily. Having a simple, evidence-based strategy to potentially reduce that risk can be incredibly empowering. If you are a survivor, I'd particularly encourage you to discuss this research with your healthcare team to see how it might fit into your overall survivorship plan. I want to be crystal clear that this approach isn't meant to replace medical care or cancer screening. Early detection remains vital, and following your doctor's recommendations for age-appropriate screening is essential. The tart cherry approach is a complement to good medical care, not a replacement for it. As we wrap up this information, I hope you feel a sense of cautious optimism. Cancer remains a serious health concern, particularly as we age, but research like this reminds us that we're not powerless. Simple, natural approaches can make a meaningful difference in our cancer risk, especially when they're based on solid science rather than hype or wishful thinking. The fact that a humble fruit could have such profound protective effects shouldn't really surprise us. Throughout human history, our primary medicines came from the plant world. Modern medicine has given us incredible tools, But sometimes the simplest approaches, the ones our grandparents might have intuitively understood, still have profound wisdom embedded in them. If you've stayed with me until this point, I want to thank you for your attention and your commitment to your health or the health of someone you love. The information I've shared today represents just one of many evidence-based strategies that can help seniors reduce their cancer risk and enhance their overall well-being. Each video on this channel aims to bring you this kind of practical, science-based information that you can actually use in your daily life. To summarize what we've covered today, tart cherries, particularly the Montmorency variety, consumed about an hour before bedtime, have been shown in research to reduce cancer risk in seniors by up to 70%. This effect appears to be due to their high melatonin content, combined with powerful anthocyanins, which together support DNA repair, reduce oxidative stress and fight inflammation, all key factors in cancer development. The timing is crucial, as evening consumption works with your body's natural circadian rhythms to maximize protective effects. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If you found this information valuable, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who might benefit from it. Cancer touches so many lives, and simple, evidence-based prevention strategies should be accessible to everyone. If you haven't already, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when we release new videos on evidence-based approaches to senior health. Next week, we'll be exploring groundbreaking research on how specific movement patterns can help preserve cognitive function as we age, something I think you'll find equally fascinating and practical. Remember, aging is not a disease to be feared, but a journey to be embraced with wisdom, knowledge, and the right tools. You have more power over your health destiny than you might realize, and it's never too late to make changes that could add both years to your life and life to your years. Until next time, here's to your health and longevity.